Have you ever met someone who, when hurt, does not cry, argue, or explain anything? Even though they are falling apart inside, they simply force a smile and say the familiar words, "I'm fine." Many people immediately assume they are cold, indifferent, or deliberately using silence to make others feel guilty. But psychology shows that the truth is often the complete opposite. For many people, silence is not a sign of emotional detachment, but the only way they know how to protect themselves when their feelings have become too overwhelming to handle. In that moment, their mind is flooded with thoughts, fears, and pain so intense that they can no longer put it into words. The more they want to speak, the more their throat tightens. The more they try to explain, the more meaningless every sentence seems. That is why they choose silence, not to punish anyone else, but to keep themselves from falling apart. Sadly, that silence is often misunderstood, causing the distance between two people to grow even wider. In this video, we will explore what truly happens inside the minds of people who go quiet when they are hurt, why they react this way, and how we can understand them before misunderstandings quietly destroy a valuable relationship. Many people believe that silence is always a conscious choice, but psychology and neuroscience suggest that this is not always the case. When a person faces overwhelming emotional conflict or deep emotional pain, the nervous system automatically activates survival mechanisms to protect the body. At first, if we are still calm enough, we can talk, explain our thoughts, and express our feelings clearly. As the pressure builds, the body shifts into a fight or flight response, making us more likely to become angry, argue, or leave a stressful situation. However, when the emotional pain exceeds what we can cope with, the nervous system may enter a freeze state. It is much like an electrical device that becomes overloaded and automatically shuts down to prevent more serious damage. In this state, the heart rate and energy levels change, the muscles become tense, and the ability to think logically and communicate with words declines significantly. This explains why someone may have hundreds of racing thoughts but still be unable to say a single word. When others keep asking, "Why aren't you saying anything?" or "Why are you so quiet?" they often feel even more pressure instead of feeling supported. At that moment, silence is not a sign of indifference or a refusal to communicate. It is the brain's natural way of protecting itself from an emotional storm that has become too overwhelming. Understanding this can help us judge less quickly and respond with greater compassion toward those who are struggling with emotions they can barely manage themselves. No one is born choosing to hide their emotions. As children, we cry when we are hurt, shout when we are angry, and seek comfort from the adults around us. These are completely natural responses. However, if a child grows up in an environment where tears are seen as weakness, anger is punished, or sadness is constantly ignored, the brain gradually learns that expressing emotions is dangerous. To avoid criticism, rejection, or abandonment, that child begins to bury every feeling deep inside. Over time, silence becomes a survival mechanism rather than a conscious choice. As they grow older, every conflict or emotional wound can quietly reactivate those painful memories from the past. They are not intentionally avoiding the conversation. Instead, their instincts urge them to withdraw as a way of protecting themselves. Sadly, the other person often sees only a cold and distant exterior, never realizing that beneath the surface they are struggling to keep their heart from breaking all over again. Understanding where this silence comes from allows us to replace judgment with compassion for the invisible wounds they may have carried for many years. If you recognized yourself in this story, or would like to continue exploring the fascinating depths of human psychology, subscribe to the channel today so you never miss new videos that will help you better understand yourself and build deeper, healthier relationships. Not everyone who goes quiet when they are hurt had a difficult childhood. For many people, this habit develops after experiencing toxic relationships. They once tried to explain how they felt, but every word was twisted or used against them. Whenever they shared their sadness, they were told they were too sensitive. When they cried, they were accused of playing the victim. When they expressed disappointment, they were labeled selfish or unreasonable. After going through this again and again, the brain learns a painful lesson. The more they speak, the more vulnerable they become. Instead of continuing to hope for understanding, they gradually begin to keep all of their emotions locked inside. Silence becomes a shield that protects them from endless arguments and new emotional wounds. This does not mean they no longer care about the relationship. On the contrary, they still long to be heard, understood, and loved. However, the fear of being dismissed or criticized leaves them without the courage to open up again. Over time, this response becomes an unconscious habit. The moment they hear a harsh tone of voice, notice a disappointed look, or sense tension in the air, they instinctively withdraw. What they need is not more pressure to speak, but a safe environment where they can believe that, this time, their feelings will be met with respect, patience, and genuine understanding. Not everyone processes emotions in the same way. Some people begin to understand what they are feeling simply by talking about it. Others are the complete opposite. They need time to organize their thoughts before they can put them into words. In psychology, these individuals are often described as people who process their emotions internally. When conflict arises or they are deeply hurt, their brain has to handle an overwhelming amount of information all at once. They are analyzing the other person's words, trying to understand their own emotions, and predicting the possible consequences of everything they might say. It all happens so quickly that their mind feels like an old computer trying to run hundreds of programs at the same time. The system becomes overloaded and needs time to process everything before it can function normally again. That is why their silence is not a sign of indifference or an attempt to avoid the conversation. It is simply the time they need to sort through the chaos in their mind and turn it into honest, thoughtful words. If they are pressured to respond immediately, they often become even more overwhelmed, say things they do not truly mean, or fall completely silent. Have you ever found yourself in that situation? Are you someone who needs to talk right away to process your emotions? Or do you need time to think before you speak? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might help someone else realize they are not alone. When someone becomes quiet after being hurt, many people assume they no longer care or have no interest in continuing the conversation. In reality, the opposite is often true. Beneath their calm exterior is a mind that never stops racing. They replay everything that just happened over and over again, remembering every word, every glance, and every subtle expression as they search for the moment when everything went wrong. They wonder if they said something they should not have, whether the other person misunderstood them, or if speaking up right now would only make the situation worse. This constant overthinking traps them in a maze of emotions and endless analysis. The harder they search for the perfect answer, the less they know where to begin. That is why some people need a great deal of time before they can finally express just a few sincere words. It is not because they lack emotions, but because they are carefully choosing the words that will cause the least amount of pain for both themselves and the other person. Sometimes, their silence is an invisible battle between reason and emotion, between the desire to be understood and the fear of being misunderstood all over again. If we judge only by what we see on the surface, it is easy to assume they are cold or uncaring. But if we look a little deeper, we may realize they are carrying more thoughts than anyone else in the room. Understanding this helps us become more patient and gives them the space they need to calm down, organize their emotions, and return to the conversation with honesty and clarity. There is one important truth that many people fail to recognize. Sometimes, silence is not about avoiding the situation. It is about protecting the other person. When emotions become overwhelming, some people can clearly feel their anger, disappointment, or emotional pain slipping beyond their control. They know that if they continue the argument in that moment, their words will no longer come from a place of calm, but from an emotional reaction. And words spoken in anger often leave the deepest and longest-lasting scars. That is why they choose to remain silent. Not because they have nothing left to say, but because they fear saying something that will hurt the person they love and leave them with lasting regret. To them, a few minutes or even a few hours of silence is far better than a single sentence that could destroy the trust built over many years. Unfortunately, the person on the other side often interprets that silence in a completely different way. They may believe they are being ignored, rejected, or no longer loved. Both people are hurting, yet each expresses that pain differently, allowing the distance between them to grow even wider. When we understand that silence can sometimes be an expression of love and self-control, we become less likely to jump to conclusions. Instead of seeing it as a sign of emotional distance, we can recognize it as the time someone needs to protect the relationship from wounds they never wanted to cause in the first place. When someone chooses silence to calm their emotions, what they usually need most is not more questions, but a safe space where they can regain their composure. In reality, however, the other person often reacts instinctively. They keep asking, "Why aren't you saying anything? Do you still want this relationship?" Or, "What does staying silent solve?" Although these questions usually come from a place of concern or a desire to resolve the problem, they can feel incredibly overwhelming to someone who is already hurting. The more they are pressured, the more they feel they have no time to process what they are experiencing. Their mind, already filled with emotional chaos, becomes even more overwhelmed. As a result, they retreat further, avoid communication, or offer short, superficial answers simply to end the conversation as quickly as possible. Those responses are not an honest reflection of how they truly feel. They are simply a way to escape the feeling of being cornered. This creates a painful cycle. The more one person demands immediate answers, the less capable the other becomes of opening up. Instead of bringing them closer together, the pressure unintentionally pushes them even farther apart. Sometimes the most helpful response is not insisting that someone speak right away, but allowing them to feel respected even when they are not yet ready to talk. Once the pressure fades and a sense of safety returns, they are far more likely to open their heart and share what is truly happening inside their mind. Behind the silence of many people is not a desire to be left alone, but a deep longing to feel safe. When their mind is overwhelmed by painful emotions, what they need most is not interrogation or judgment, but reassurance that they are still accepted, even if they cannot yet put their feelings into words. The human nervous system is constantly scanning the environment, quietly deciding whether it is safe enough to relax and be vulnerable. If the person in front of them remains calm, patient, and respectful of the time they need to regain emotional balance, they will gradually begin to feel less tense and more willing to open up. Sometimes, a simple sentence like, "I'll be here whenever you're ready," offers far more comfort than dozens of urgent questions. On the other hand, if their silence is always met with anger, disappointment, or criticism, they may slowly come to believe that expressing their emotions will only lead to more pain. Each experience adds another layer to the walls they have built around their heart. Over time, trust within the relationship begins to crack, even without a single major argument. That is why one of the greatest gifts you can offer someone who is hurting is your calm presence and your patience. If these insights have helped you better understand human psychology and relationships, give this video a like, so more people can discover these meaningful perspectives and perhaps feel a little less alone. Many people believe that the best way to resolve a conflict is to talk about it immediately. However, for those who tend to go quiet when they are hurt, that approach can sometimes have the opposite effect. While their nervous system is still overwhelmed and under stress, any pressure to explain themselves or provide immediate answers only leaves them feeling more emotionally exhausted. What they need in that moment is not a long discussion, but the reassurance that they are respected and understood. Instead of repeatedly asking, "When are you finally going to talk?" or "Why do you keep avoiding this?" try a different approach. You might gently say, "I know this is really difficult for you right now. Take the time you need, and when you're ready, I'll be here to listen." A simple sentence like that can make them feel far safer than endless questions ever could. The important thing is to let them know that you are stepping back out of respect for their emotions, not because you are giving up on the relationship. Sometimes a calm and reassuring presence is more powerful than hundreds of pieces of advice or persistent demands for answers. As the pressure fades, their mind begins to settle, and their emotions become easier to understand. When that happens, they are much more likely to return to the conversation on their own, not because they were forced to, but because they know they will be heard with patience, compassion, and without judgment. That is the foundation of healthy communication, and one of the most powerful ways two people can heal emotional wounds without losing the trust they have built together. If you are someone who often goes quiet when you are hurt, remember that the way you process your emotions is not a flaw. You are not cold, and you are certainly not uncaring. You simply need more time to understand what is happening inside you before you can put your feelings into words. However, while silence may help you regain your emotional balance, allowing it to last for too long can leave the people you love feeling anxious and confused. They may not know whether you simply need space or whether you are pulling away from the relationship altogether. That uncertainty can easily lead to painful misunderstandings. Instead of disappearing completely, try building a bridge with a simple message. You could say, "I'm not ready to talk right now because my mind is still overwhelmed. Please give me about an hour to calm down, and then I'll come back so we can work through this together. Even a brief message like this can reassure the other person that you are not avoiding them, but taking the time you need to manage your emotions in a healthy way. At the same time, it gives you the space to organize your thoughts without the added pressure of responding immediately. After everything we have explored, perhaps the most important thing to remember is that silence is not always a sign of coldness or emotional distance. For many people, it is simply the only way they know how to protect their heart when their emotions become too overwhelming. They are not lacking in love, nor do they care any less than anyone else. In fact, because they feel everything so deeply, they are often more thoughtful and intentional with every word and action. When they finally admit that they have been hurt, it is usually because they have been carrying that pain for a long time. And when they tell someone they truly care, those words are rarely spoken on impulse. They are promises that have been considered with great care. However, silence has value only when it serves as a pause for healing and reflection, not as a wall that separates two hearts. Learning to listen, respecting the time another person needs, and knowing how to return to an honest conversation are the keys to building strong and lasting relationships. Sometimes, what a hurting person needs most is not the perfect advice, but someone who is willing to stay by their side without judgment. If this video has helped you better understand the psychology of people who go quiet when they are hurt, or given you a new perspective on relationships, subscribe to the channel today. Every day, we share fascinating insights into psychology and human behavior to help you understand yourself more deeply, build healthier relationships, and gradually find greater peace within yourself.